Hello and welcome to another AIC video. And yes, this is at least partially another video to try to convince you to not overpay for a Thinkpad T480. This E14 Gen 3 I have here, I was able to pick up for $5 less than what I paid for my T480. So yes, I paid less money for this than I did for my T480, but is it worth less money? I want to take a look at this E14 and see what you get. And I've broken my thoughts down into 5 categories. We have build quality, build materials, features, upgradability, and performance. So I've never reviewed an E series before, and I think that's a bit remiss of me to not have done that. They just really don't pop up on my shopping list very often. And I've always had the impression that they were a big step down in build quality. And the first impression I have is that it's really not. It's actually quite well built. There's not a lot of flex in the keyboard. There's no flex in the screen, no wobble in the screen when I'm typing. There's no creaks anywhere. It feels quite solid. And the keyboard is really quite excellent. I was actually quite impressed with this. It feels like it's a slightly older style ThinkPad keyboard where you get more key travel out of it. Might be the same one as the T480. Definitely better than some of the newer ThinkPads that I reviewed with less key travel. On a scale out of 10, I would give this a build quality a solid 8. Far better than I expected. Obviously, built to a price, which we'll talk about more in build materials. So I can't give it a full 10 points, but I expect this to have a similar longevity to a T-Series when treated the same. You know, if you're not abusing this like you wouldn't abuse any of your laptops, you're going to expect a similar life expectancy, I would expect, out of this. Now, as far as build materials, what it's actually made out of, this is where you actually start to see some of those budget cuts. I showed you the bottom of the case. I'll show you again. The bottom of the laptop reminds me of that early 2000s GM plastic dashes, kind of that rough material there. It's hard and rough and kind of cheap feeling. It feels like it would survive a nuclear blast, but not be real happy about it. There are also cheaper materials on the lid and on the palm rest. It's all ABS plastic here, baby. Just for contrast, my P14S Gen 2, which was made the same year as this, as well as the T480, have a glass fiber-filled PPS and PA with a magnesium alloy chassis palm rest. For those who don't know, glass fiber-filled plastics are stronger, have more shock absorption, have more wear resistant, and are more durable when compared to plain ABS. However, the process to make them wears out machines much faster and the molds much faster, so the material is much more expensive. ABS plastic is cheap, and your hands kind of feel it when you touch it. It's obvious that you're touching a less quality product. Now, I'm not saying that the cheaper plastics should be something to avoid, only that there is a reason this laptop costs so much less than its counterparts in the TP and X series. It also might mean that a drop or fall might be a bit more catastrophic to the E14 than a T or P series in the same situation, and is more likely to show wear and tear from daily use. You can see from the lid, there's definitely more scratches, and on the bottom we have some deeper scratches from, just general use of the system. So just keep that in mind when buying. After a few weeks of use, again, only just a few weeks, I don't really see an issue with the material choice in a more budget system, and I think it's a fair trade-off for the cost. It's interesting to see what is not included or not available on the E14. There's no NFC available at all, or an SD card reader, no WAN, smart card, etc. It also gets fewer ports than its T-series counterparts. There's no dock port here on the left side. There's only one USB-C, and being that this is an AMD laptop, it only has power delivery and DisplayPort capabilities. It is not Thunderbolt, but it is also your only charging port. So if you damage this, you're SOL. Mine does not have a backlit keyboard, though that does seem to be an option on some. And the screen is mine's a TN panel, and you can kind of tell with some of the viewing angles, especially that kind of top-down view where it kind of washes out. However, being a TN panel, it's definitely not as bad as they used to be. Even my W530, which also has a 1920 by 1080 TN panel, the difference is night and day. This is so much better than that. But it is not IPS, though compared side by side, and I can bring that up here in a second, with the IPS of my T480, it's really not that much. The IPS of the T480 is not that much better. All right, so I have both laptops here in front of me, the T480 on the left and the E14 here on the right. And you can see the difference between the screens. And honestly, my biggest complaint of the T480 is that it's never bright enough. Even when it's at full brightness, I find myself constantly trying to increase the brightness of this. This is a 250 nit screen. It is IPS 1920 by 1080. This is TN 1920 by 1080, but it's a 300 nit, and it is significantly brighter. Now, it's harder to see that in the camera just because of the way cameras take in light, but let me tell you, in person, it is a significant difference, and I don't find myself trying to increase the brightness on the E14 with that display. Now, this laptop does come from the era of soldered RAM, so of course we do have some soldered RAM on here. Mine came with 8 gigs of RAM soldered. The other option was 4 gigs of RAM, so I'm glad that it did come with the 8. I've tested it with both an 8 gig DIMM and a 16 gig DIMM, both in the upgrade slot each. Both worked as expected. I don't have a 32 gig DDR4 DIMM. They're currently $200 each, twice what I paid for the laptop. So I've not tried that config. If anybody would like to send me a 32 gig DDR4 DIMM, I will take it. Mine does have the second lowest CPU option, the Ryzen 5 5500U, though that is still a 6-core 12-thread CPU with a pretty decent integrated graphics card. We get one USB 3.1 port. The other USB port here on this other side is just a USB 2.0, so saving some money there again. I think that's okay because a lot of things that most people use don't really take advantage of higher speeds. If you have a wireless mouse or a USB controller, or heck, even my iPhone with its lightning cable is limited to USB 2.0 speeds. So not really losing out much there with that slower port. It does have Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.0 in a socketed card. Speakers are typical lackluster ThinkPad. Now, as far as upgradability, I did do a hardware showcase opening this laptop up. I'll link that here. Speaking of that socketed Wi-Fi adapter, in addition to being able to upgrade the Wi-Fi, there is one available RAM slot and 2 NVMe SSD slots, so you can upgrade the storage on this quite easily. Mine came with the 2242 slot populated already, with a 2280 available for a second drive. There isn't too much more that can be upgraded. I did repaste the CPU. The keyboard is not replaced easily. You can see that here where the holes are part of the palm rest. It's not impossible, but definitely not for the faint of heart. The screen is easily replaced with an IPS display for about $50. I'm considering maybe doing that if I decide to keep the system. Mine came with a 45 watt hour battery, but there is a 57 watt hour battery available. Now, in my hardware showcase, I mentioned I don't know where that would fit in here. I just know it's available. So I don't know if it's thicker or what, but it is something to consider if you need a lot more battery life. My battery is about 85% of total capacity, so it still has some life left in it, and I'm not looking to replace it anytime soon. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say this is a solid 6.5 of being repairable. While extremely uncommon, failed solder RAM would brick the board, but so would a bad RAM socket. And I've had those go bad on older ThinkPads like an X250. If you pick it up from the corner, it causes the soldered RAM slot to become desoldered. And so having just one upgradable RAM with soldered RAM does limit your total upgradability of the system. Now, going on to performance, I'm going to run some benchmarks of the T480 and the E14 side by side, so I'll be here in just a second. But this is the real important piece for me. Again, I paid $5 less for this machine than I did for my T480, and yet it outperforms the T480 by between 50 and 60% in synthetic benchmarks. It doesn't lag or hiccup going between apps or web pages. You can actually play some games on it. It runs cooler and quieter. So for me, in my thought process at least, what is actually important in being a laptop, the E14 Gen 3 does it better. All right, so for the E14, we have a score of 6,754. On the T480, we have a score of 3,006 in Cinebench. So that is more than twice the speed in Cinebench. Let's go ahead and pull up the next benchmark. All right, so on the right, we have a total score of 2974 versus on the T480, the a total score of 2006. For the E14, we have a CPU mark of 13273, which is not quite twice the speed of the CPU on the T480 at 7600. And again, for the 3D mark on the E14, we have a 3D mark of 2001 versus a 3D mark of 1347 on the T480. So obviously a little bit of a difference there. Now, why did I title this reason 347 to not get a T480? Because for the price you get so much more for your money. Yes, this is a more budget-oriented line, but it also costs less for me to buy when looking at average sold prices of T480s and E14s on eBay. You really get more of what matters, performance. I recognize that there are a few people who really value the things that a T480 can give you. This video isn't for you. You're not going to buy, or you are going to buy a T480 regardless. But honestly, 90% of people buying laptops need the newest, most performance they can get for their money. And when you can spend less money on more performance, a lot of other things about this laptop are easily forgiven. This is a great laptop, solid build quality, awesome performance, some upgradability more than other laptops released around the same time, and for the price, what you give up is pretty minimal. Some plastic qualities and a few less ports. There are plenty of these on eBay for around 150 bucks, some even accepting offers. If you're considering a T480, look at an E14 instead. You can get it cheaper than a P14S or T14 of the same generation with exactly the same CPU, and I think it's a great deal worth considering. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have an amazing day.